In this video, we are going to talk about Object Oriented Programming or OOP for short. Object Oriented Programming is a very important and popular paradigm in programming, and it's widely used in many languages including JavaScript. But what is OOP and how does it work, and how is it different from the more traditional procedural programming, and what are the different ways of implementing OOP in JavaScript? So these are the some questions that we are going to answer in this video. So let's get started. Now, what is object oriented programming? Object oriented programming is a way of organizing and structuring our code based on the concept of objects. And as you already know, objects are entities that have properties and methods. Properties are variables that store data or information about the object, such as its name, color, size, etc. And methods are functions that perform actions or behaviors on the object, such as moving, speaking, and calculating. For example, let's say we want to create a program that simulates a zoo. We can use OOP to create objects that represent different animals such as lions, tigers, and bears. Each animal object can have properties like name, age, weight, etc., and methods like eat, sleep, and roar. Now, as you can see, we can use the dot notation to access the properties and methods of this animal object. We can also use the this keyword inside the methods to refer to the current object. This way, we can create and manipulate objects that encapsulate data and behavior in a single unit. Now you might be wondering, why do we need OOP and what are the benefits of using OOP over procedural programming? Well, there are several advantages of OOP, such as modularity, abstraction, and encapsulation. Modularity allows us to divide our code into smaller and independent modules or classes that can be reused and maintained easily. Now, these classes are blueprints or templates that define the properties and methods of a certain type of object. For example, we can create a class called animal that defines the general properties and methods of any animal, and then create subclasses that inherit from the animal class, such as lion, tiger, and bear. Now, each subclass can have its own specific properties and methods, as well as the ones inherited from the parent class. This way, we can avoid repeating code and create objects that share some common characteristics and behaviors. Now, in OOP, abstraction allows us to hide the complexity and implementation detail of our code and only expose the essential features and functionality to the user. And abstraction is the process of simplifying and generalizing our code so that we can focus on the what rather than how. For example, when we use a smartphone, we don't need to know how the hardware and software work internally. We only need to know how to use the interface and the apps. Similarly, when we create objects, we don't need to know how the properties and methods are defined and executed internally, and we only need to know how to access and use them. Abstraction help us to reduce the complexity and increase the readability and usability of our code. And then we have encapsulation. Encapsulation allows us to protect and control the access and modification of the data and behavior of our objects. Encapsulation is the process of bundling and restricting the properties and methods of our object so that we can prevent unauthorized or unwanted changes to our code. For example, when we use a bank account, we don't want anyone to access or modify our balance, transactions, or personal information. We only want to use the methods provided by the bank, such as deposit, withdraw, and transfer. Similarly, when we create objects, we don't want anyone to access or modify the properties and methods directly. We only want to use the methods provided by the class, such as getters, setters, and validators. So encapsulation help us to ensure the integrity and security of our code. Now, how is OOP different from procedural programming? So, OOP is different from procedural programming in several ways. Procedural programming is a way of organizing and structuring our code based on the concept of procedures. And procedures are sequences of instructions or commands that perform a specific task or function. For example, let's say we want to create a program that calculates the area of different shapes, such as circles, squares, rectangles, etc. We can use procedural programming to create procedures that take the parameters of the shapes, such as radius, length, width, etc., and return the area of the shapes. Now, some of the differences between object oriented programming and procedural programming are data and behavior, modularity and reusability, abstraction and complexity, flexibility and maintainability. So, in OOP, data and behavior are combined and encapsulated in objects, whereas in procedural programming, data and behavior are separated and defined in variables and procedures. And now we have modularity and reusability. In OOP, code is divided into smaller and independent modules or classes that can be reused and inherited, whereas in procedural programming, code is divided into larger and dependent blocks or scripts that can be repeated and copied. And then we have abstraction and complexity. In OOP, complexity and implementation details are hidden and simplified by abstraction, whereas in procedural programming, complexity and implementation details are exposed and detailed by procedures. And at last, we have flexibility and maintainability. In OOP, code is more flexible and maintainable as changes and additions can be made easily and locally, whereas in procedural programming, code is less flexible and maintainable as changes and additions can be difficult and global. And that is it for today's video. In this video, we learned about object oriented programming or OOP, which is a way of organizing and structuring our code based on the concept of objects. So I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to join this web development journey with us. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Keep coding and keep creating. I will see you in the next video.